desde el fondo de mi corazón. Gracias. What's the weight of trauma? According to the APA, long time no see, it is, quote, emotional response to a terrible event like an accident, ape, or natural disaster. Immediately after the event, shock and denial are typical. Longer-term reactions include unpredictable emotions, flashbacks, strained relationships, and even physical symptoms like headaches or nausea. While these feelings are normal, some people have difficulty moving on with their lives. Trauma, one of those things most people tend to throw a blanket meaning to it and treat it the same, despite the different varieties there can be. Not to mention how people can react to it depending on their own experiences. Trauma is more than just one bad memory. Sometimes could be something as simple as an instant. Others could be experiences which lasted years. It could be rooted on an accident, on emotional turmoil, or sometimes the total lack of an emotional outlet to vent the emotion bottled up during said events. Trauma is a shadow any of us could be living with and never know it, so long we refuse to face ourselves. So with that grim introduction, the Rhine Family. Since the beginning of the game, one of the first groups to get most players' attention was that of the original members of the Rhine Labs faction. Managing to stand out among a cast full of interesting characters, it was obvious people will wonder what the relation was and theorizing about what story we will see from them. As of now, we are far from getting that story. However, we are finally getting fed. With the Rhine Labs event ending in CN, it will be around 6 months for us to experience the beginnings of the Rhine storyline. And yet, we can already sink our analytic fangs into something quite juicy. As you see, to commemorate Rhine's event, Hypergriff released a new story on the Records of Originium series, retelling the story of how Zarya, Silence, and Ifrit's lives crossed with one another. Needless to say, it is a treasure trove of information. Despite, still being in Chinese. But before I say anything else, let me warn you all right now. I am going to spoil the heck of that manhwa. So if you want to experience it for yourself, you can head to Hypergriff's Terra Historicus page and see it with your own eyes. Even if you don't understand the language, the images themselves are clear enough to catch most of the meaning. But the instant it's translated, I am properly reading the hell out of it. Anyway, there is your warning, so don't at me if you get spoiled. Also, and as expected from the introduction used in this video, I will be discussing trauma. While I won't get into anything too disturbing, be sure to avoid this video if you don't like what you are hearing. As always, if you happen to identify with any of the things discussed here, please seek professional aid. The job of a mental health specialist is to help you with what ails you, never to judge you for it. Okay, with the intro out of the way, let's get started. I am Dr. Blob, and this is my psychological analysis of the Rhine family. Now, if you are wondering, what does any of that nonsense has to do with our PNG characters? First, go read that manhwa. Clearly you haven't. Second, as pixelated as they are, their stories are not so different to that of regular humans of flesh and blood, and thus making it possible to perform an analysis of their presumed psyches. A small recap for those who haven't seen my previous psychological analysis videos. I am properly educated in psychology, leaning mainly towards the humanistic branch of treatment. That means I focus on patients' improvement as individuals without the aid of drugs, if possible. I will perform an analysis of the characters of Zarya, Silence, and Ifrit. Sorry, Auntie Applesauce, you are too unknown to analyze just yet. Looking at their current behavior, trying to identify what it is that they suffer from and suggest what I believe will be the best treatment for them to improve as individuals. And before you mention it, yes, group therapy will be the best option to mend the rift between them. However, each one of them will need individual treatment in order to be mentally stable to proceed with a group effort. That will be especially important for the mothers, as we will see in due time. So, it is only fair we start with the one who made them come together in the first place. Ifrit's past is a complete mystery. at least before being taken in by Rhine Labs' secret subsidiary, Hidden Pharmaceutical. Not even her race is known. While the game files imply she is a Sarkas, the manhwa mentioned she could have been a Sabra, but her genetic code is so heavily modified, it is pretty much impossible to determine what she is. Up to a good start. Not only she doesn't remember who she was, she doesn't even know what she was. I guess I don't need to explain to you all how damaging that is to a developing mind, as it removes any sense of belonging. At the experimentation and sterile environment she was in, it was downright alien for her. We don't know for how long she was experimented on by Hayden. All we know is that it was intense enough for her to lash out and burn the place down. It is well known how those who have survived violent environments tend to show these sort of characteristics. Reserved, distant, short of patience, and easy to anger. Needless to say, Ifrit had very little trust on either white coats or laboratories, not without good reason. Because of this, and what happened later on Rhine Labs, Ifrit has her own share of PTSD, being prone to lash out in anger whenever a trauma trigger occurs around her. What is PTSD and a trauma trigger? Go watch my first analysis video, I explained them in more detail there. The most regular outcome of Ifrit's stress and anxiety, besides rude words and outbursts of anger, is the spontaneous generation of fire, which can vary from a few flames to a fire tornado. However, there is also the fact of Ifrit's regressed mental state. Mental regression, or simply regression, is a defense mechanism often seen in victims of abuse, as the mind desperately tries to find a way out of their current experiences. So it goes back to what the mind thinks was the safest, the past. Quote, return to a prior, lower state of cognitive, emotional, or behavioral function. This term is associated particularly with psychoanalytic theory, denoting a situation in which the individual reverts to immature behavior or to an earlier stage of psychosexual development when treated with overwhelming external problems or internal conflicts. This is also the source of stress-induced amnesia, which Ifrit could be also suffering from. But due to the whole cocktail of chemicals she must have back then, it is uncertain if that was the case or if her memories were literally bleached out of her mind. Returning to its relevance to this case, since Ifrit's mind is underdeveloped, her patience and self-control are already on the short side, and to that we have to add her chronic PTSD and the constant pains caused by her infection, thus making most therapies useless, by virtue of Ifrit's temperament and abilities, turning any attempt to perform treatment into pretty much a safety hazard for anyone involved. Ifrit is a very traumatized young woman who strives to be the one in control. Her sadistic streaks and prideful boasting are but a way for her to cope with her trauma, placing herself in the place she considers herself to be of power, doing the same things she suffered back then. As sad as it is normal for victims of abuse to continue the cycle of aggression by rationalizing, if I suffered this, then so should you. However, I won't say she is completely defined by her trauma, as she still longs to enjoy life, just as she did back when Sari and Silence were beside her. In this case, and considering the risk, I will propose two kinds of therapy to run in conjunction of one another. The first one meant to deal with her explosive temperament and to give her an outlet to her fiery outburst. Arts therapy, as in artistic, not the one where she sets people on fire. Quote, the use of artistic activities, such as painting and clay modeling in psychotherapy and rehabilitation. The process of making art is seen as healing, an experience that provides the opportunity to express oneself imaginatively, authentically, and spontaneously. Over time, this process can lead to personal fulfillment, emotional reparation, and transformation. The products made in art therapy are seen as means of symbolic communication and a vehicle for developing new insights and understandings, resolving conflicts, solving problems, and formulating new perceptions to achieve positive changes, growth, and rehabilitation. While some think of it as childish, art therapy is more than painting with your fingers. It gives the mind something to focus on, without any expectation or desired outcome, only the freedom to do and create as the patient sees fit. Personally, I will give Ifrit a hunk of glass and told her to do with it as she sees fit, with some safety measures of course. The objective will be for her to increase her control in both her art and her emotions, helping her to note how she can be more than the weapon she was designed as, and that destruction is not the only outlet for her to have. As a secondary treatment, I would suggest thanatology treatment. Quote, the study of death and death-related behaviors, thoughts, feelings, and phenomena. Often thought to be exclusively related with death and mourning, thanatology revolves around all experiences where people suffers from loss, not only of someone, but sometimes of a job, a relationship, a limb, a way of life, etc. As thanatology is meant to help patients to leave those experiences behind them, in order to move forward. The most often used of this therapy, outside of death, is in cancer patients, not because they are in the late stages of their disease, but because it helps them accept it. It is not going away and is most likely changing their lives forever. It helps them to accept this fact, adapt, and move forward with their lives. They have cancer, yes, but they are still alive. And that is what is important. Now, its importance on Ifrit's case is for her to let go of her past, both the bad and the good. No matter how much she longs for it, the time she had with Saria and Silence is not coming back. Can they make new ones? Definitely. And that's what she needs to face. As well as to make her look for ways to move forward, away from the pain and memories from Rhine Labs. As always, they won't disappear, they can't, but she can make amends with it, so long she wishes for it. So if treated carefully, Ifrit could be the one to once more bring Saria and Silence together, regardless of shipping. And with that excuse of a joke, let's head towards our next patient.
イフリータがまた暴れてる。ごめん。後で叱っておくから。
Dr. Silence is easier to understand to a degree. She has made her dislike for Saria known since very early on, and yet there have been hints here and there pointing at the two of them having a closer relationship, with the manhwa finally giving us a clear answer in that regard. While it wasn't as close as some of us expected, it is clear they cared for Ifrit together, so why does she hate Saria so much now? First, we will have to analyze the information more properly. For starters, Silence seemed to admire Saria before ever joining Rhine Labs, probably even being the reason she applied to them in the first place. And during their time looking after Ifrit together, it was clear they had a very good relationship, again, regardless of shipping. That is, until the diabolic incident. Coaxed and gaslighted by her superior, Aren Parvis, Silence conducted the aforementioned experiments on Ifrit in order to develop the weapon Columbia desired, while clearly hating every second of it, culminating with her risking her career by planning Ifrit's escape, making her look to have succumbed to one of the tests. What no one could have predicted was that this very thing would be the catalyst needed to complete what Rhine was looking for, to awaken the now extinct diabolic sarcasm, better known as that voice in Ifrit's head. This in itself gives us a lot of information regarding the infection and the voices that often comes with it, but this isn't that kind of video. So let's leave it for another day. After the initial outburst, Silence was only able to see the conclusion of the incident, which left Saria in a terrible light. In fact, she was already doubting her friend thanks to the aforementioned gaslighting Parvis gave her, showing one single document containing Saria signing it when talking about Rhine's true intentions for Ifrit. For Olivia, it was obvious that Saria couldn't be trusted anymore, and promised to help Ifrit without her. But then again, how can she believe this? We know Silence is smart. Very smart. So how come we didn't know what was on that signed paper? As far as we know, it could be related to anything but Ifrit's research. So then why? Because projection is one hell of a thing. Quote, process by which one attributes one's own individual positive or negative characteristics, affects, and impulses to another person or group. This is often a defense mechanism in which unpleasant or unacceptable impulses, stressors, ideas, affects, or responsibilities are attributed to others. Such defensive patterns are often used to justify prejudice or evade responsibility. Projection permits the individual to avoid seeing his or her own faults, but modern usage has largely abandoned the requirement that the projected trait remain unknown in the self. Silence knows, or at the very least, might guess what really happened back then, but accepting that would leave all of the blame to herself, in her own mind at least. What is happening here is the fact that, while used by her superiors, Silence was in the end the one responsible for what happened to Ifrit. Her suffering, her pain, her outburst, they all happened because of her. As always, I am not blaming anyone. We do know who is to blame here. I am merely pointing out the facts in Silence's logic, and her logic told her she screwed up. Big time. She sees herself guilty for this, and makes her daily work to amend for it, by looking after Ifrit. However, she cannot come to face all the brunt of reality by herself. Thus, in comes Saria, someone she used to look up to, someone she thought she could trust, but who eventually turned out to be the very one to put Ifrit into her torment. That is what Silence believes, what makes her able to face Ifrit. In her mind, Silence puts the blame she feels for herself on Saria, because that makes it easier for her to continue her penance. It is not my fault. I was ordered to. The blame falls on those giving the orders, on those signing the papers. So long Olivia believes this, she won't be able to move forward. So it is good to see she might be questioning said beliefs. At the end of the manhwa, and I mean the very last pages, Silence gives Saria a speech. I don't know what she said, but the fact she went and talked directly to the one she blames for everything while keeping a resolute face and ending with a smile in Saria tells me she does have her doubts regarding the events that transpired. So, what do I suggest for treatment? My choice will be narrative exposure therapy. It is, quote, treatment for trauma disorders, particularly in individuals suffering from complex and multiple trauma. It has been most frequently used in community settings and with individuals who experienced trauma as a result of political, cultural, or social forces. It is understood that the story a person tells himself or herself about their life influences how the person perceives their experiences and well-being. Framing one's life story solely around the traumatic experiences lead to a feeling of persistent trauma and distress. NAT is meant to ask for the patient to retell the story of the traumatic event, exactly as they remember it, and slowly pointing out inconsistencies in the narrative, a possibly bias of the events, while staying grounded in the present, all in order to reframe the event in a new light, which will help the patient to see it from a different perspective. Again, Dr. Olivia Silence is a smart individual. While it will be hard at first, I have no doubt she will be able to notice the flaws in her logic and reasoning regarding the incident. The goal is for her to come to terms with the event. Yes, she was used as a pawn, yet she has something to do with those events. But what matters now is what she wants from her life. So far, all we have seen is her desire to cure Ifrit. But what after that? To find a future to her life beyond looking after her child will be my suggestion, as to give her existence a meaning beyond redemption. Ironically, one of Hyperglyph official mangas do deliver this message to her, by none other than Saria herself. In the comic anthology number 1, while the event described there is non-canon, and a bit too easy to say the least, the message delivered is exactly what I believe Silence needs to hear, as her life can be much more than just penance and condemning, so long she has the will to face herself and move forward. Speaking of moving, now it's time to look at the one being we all can agree is the definition of a breathing, unmovable object.
サイレンスと口論しているところを見た？いつものことだ。いや、すまない。ロドスにもお前にも迷惑をかけたな。
Saria is the character we got to know the most during the manhwa's run. We actually got to see her as a child. That is quite rare. The only other non-main characters we have ever seen like this is Silver Daddy and Sire, and like those two, her childhood was marked by hardships, because Terra. We don't get to see his face. Heck, he only appeared for barely a page, but that was enough to tell us the kind of parent Saria's father was. Strict and very detached from emotions. admonishing her daughter for being weak and pushing her to be stronger. Having grown in such a demanding environment, Saria had to look for herself most of her life, striving to become the hard individual her parents demanded her to be, and eventually reaching that and more. To quote a certain Scottish duck, she became the smartest of the smarties and tougher than the tokies, becoming the co-founder of one of the biggest, if not the biggest, technological companies in all of Terra, and the one in charge to defend it. To say all the memes regarding her as a mountain of a woman are not as exaggerated as we thought. I mean, these images exist, so it is safe to assume her fame is very well earned. Now, why is this important? Saria was taught to be strong and, by proxy, to reject anything she would deem as a weakness. This is clearly shown when she demanded a child to stop crying, said child apparently being a survivor from hidden laboratory explosion. Not that she was cruel, mind you, she just didn't understand the logic behind tears. That is a very normal behavior found in people who suffered from childhood trauma, because parental neglect can lead to trauma. This is a case of primary repression, in which, quote, ideas associated with instinctual wishes are screened out and prevented from becoming conscious. Primary repression contrasts with repression proper, in which the repressed material has already been in the realm of consciousness. While probably well intended, the action from her father denied Saria of the emotional validation a young child needs in order to develop a healthy personality, making her build herself as strong as possible without room for weakness, turning Saria tougher than diamond as a result, both physically and mentally. And while there are physical risks theorized as a result of this repression, Saria's lifestyle and very mastery of arts fix it without her ever noticing any possible anomaly in her body, that is to say, until a certain child come her way. Since Saria imprinted on Ifrit as someone who will help her, the then director was asked to visit the young child whenever possible, in order to help as emotional support as well as to give Saria information regarding the fate of Hayden's laboratory. While she first saw her interaction with Ifrit and Silence as nothing more than part of her job, shortly after we could see how much the stoic defender come to enjoy her time with them, because, despite all the pressure placed on her by her father, Saria always wanted to know what a warm family felt like, a subconscious desire that survived despite all the studying and training Saria went through, and which slowly but surely come to realize when spending time with Silence and Ifrit. While I will keep romantic suppositions out of my analysis in order to keep a neutral state of mind, I have no doubt she come to see both girls as the family she always wanted, which in turn explained her actions during and after the diabolic incident. While taken over by the diabolic sarcasm, Ifrit became a threat not only to Rhine Labs, but to the whole city, and being the logical individual that she is, Saria could only come to one conclusion: to suppress the enraged test subject, and despite knowing the risk Ifrit represented, she was unable to perform her duty as her logic demanded her. She did feed the young girl in an effort to knock her unconscious, yet the demon inside her was way too stubborn for half efforts. But eventually, said effort speed up. Ifrit regained consciousness just as Saria was about to run a blade through the child. Sadly, that didn't change the fact she had to beat Ifrit into submission, something she clearly regrets to this very day. While short, Saria had come to experience the life she longed for so many years, and now that it lay broken and beaten because of her, she no longer considered herself worthy to be a part of it, so she left. Not before delivering the mother of all resignation speeches to her former boss. Now, Saria looks for a way to mend the damage she made, while looking after Ifrit from the distance. And even if she could clear the relationship by explaining everything, she won't, because for her, that would be a sign of weakness, and there is no place for weakness. Even when suggested by Cal, I am too old for everyone's BS, Sid, that explaining things will fix so many things, Saria remains resolute in her choice, because just as Silence sees looking after Ifrit as penance, Saria sees her work dealing with the shady deals of Rhine Labs as something only she has to perform. In conclusion, Saria is someone who had suffered the longest out of everyone in this video. The most is debatable, but her whole life she had been taught to solve things by her own might alone, be it of mind or of body. She is the only one who should see things through. So, how would I treat someone who is stronger than Diamond? If possible to convince her into therapy to begin with, I will suggest good old psychotherapy. I am more of a here and now sort of psychologist, but Saria's trauma is rooted way too much in her infancy for her to see any change in her life. Thus, a psychotherapist should be the one to work with her in order to help her see how this she sees as her family suffer by her self-imposed absence, by making her notice this and help her finally admit that some things are not as debilitating as she must originally think. For instance, she lived without tears for most of her life, yet she finally come to accept crying as a valid action once she held everything in her arms. The diamond she built herself as is not as unbreakable as she might believe. This of course is not a bad thing. If she can come to understand this, she can come to understand the value of other emotions and actions she will rather deem as weakness, will serve as the foundation needed to bring the three women back together, as the family they found in each other. For that end, I will suggest group therapy, of the familiar kind, being, quote, treatment of psychological problems in which two or more participants interact with each other in both an emotional and cognitive level in the presence of one or more psychotherapists who serve as catalysts, facilitators, or interpreters. The approaches vary, but in general they aim to provide an environment in which problems and concerns can be shared in an atmosphere of mutual respect and understanding. Group therapy seeks to enhance self-respect, deepen self-understanding, and improve interpersonal relationships. The goal will be to aid each of them to come clean to one another, to express their feelings in a way they do not only berate each other, but also aid them to see the reasons behind their actions. It won't be an easy task, but if they do manage to go through their individual treatments, I have no doubts they will be able to come closer than ever before. After all, that's what family is for. And that's pretty much it. Finally, come to make another one of these analyses, and have to admit, I enjoyed every second of it. If only we could get more backgrounds like this more often, but for now, this will have to do. This has been Dr. Blob, hoping you have enjoyed this video of mine, and humbly asking for you to like, share and subscribe. As always, stay healthy everyone, and cherish your family, blood ties or not.